Hello, everybody. I am Tyloa Parker. I have the pleasure of serving as the president of Michigan State University Black Alumni Oakland County Chapter. Welcome to MSUBA Black in the Bold series. I just want to provide a quick little overview of MSUBA and this series here that you are watching and tuned in on. MSUBA was established 40 years ago. I started with 4 individuals, Vita Dove Washington, Terry Young, Betty Nixon, and Laurel Baltimore, when they decided they wanted to plan a homecoming weekend program for fellow Black alumni near the campus of MSU. And just off of that effort, they had over 600 Black alumni and friends participate in the 1980 homecoming at the MSU University Club. And from there, a formal organization was established. Now, Oakland County chapter was established in 2015 with the intent of supporting and promoting the welfare and interests of Black alumni, students, faculty, and the community at Michigan State University. We are a local extension of the MSU Black Alumni Incorporation. Now, here we are on the Black and the Bold. This is a platform to push tough conversations as well as have fun and grow in our knowledge of the world we live in today. Our aim is to give you the real on today's national social issues while having some fun. A humorous, uplifting, and brutally honest platform for the Black adults maneuvering through life and also providing entertainment. The greatest part of it all is that we are going to be interactive and engaging with you with the chance to engage through the comment section. So expect pearls of wisdom, sparks of controversy, open minds, different perspectives, and respect for all. I have the honor and the privilege to introduce to you all our guest panelists for tonight. Tonight's episode is on race in the workplace. Is it something that we talk about, we shouldn't discuss, or is that something that our leadership, and whomever that may be, the business owners, the CEOs, CFOs, whoever it is, should they start those conversations? So today we have with us, I want to start with Mr. Quinn Wright. He is, yes, the president of Detroit Spartans, which is an alumni club of MSU here in the metropolitan Detroit area. He is a father of 3 creative, exuberant little girls. He is an active community member. He participates in his children's elementary school, and he also does a lot of work in the community as it comes with parenting and with families and education. Our next guest is Ms. Megan Burgess, who graduated actually from Saginaw Valley State University, but has green and white in her blood. She has worked in Wayne County with the juvenile delinquency in foster care and protective services field, and also removal protection. And then she took a switch and earned a degree in education, where she has taught in a predominantly Black and urban school district, and now has made a huge switch to an majority white in a district in Boyne City. Lastly, we have Dr. Tiffany Williams, who is a proud graduate of Michigan State University, who obtained her bachelor's degree in secondary education. In April of this year, she became Dr. Williams and completed her doctorate of educational leadership at Oakland University, where she currently serves as the coordinator for diversity and inclusion for Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hi,
everyone.
So let's kick it off really quickly. And I want to ask each of you, and I'll start with Quinn, do you think, or no, have you had a personal experience with discussing race at your place of employment? And just speak about the experience for us. Either it can be now with everything with the civil unrest, COVID, all that great stuff, or even before. So Quinn.
Yeah. So me personally, I have had a conversation recently. So I'm a financial advisor for Edward Jones, and so I work for a corporation. If you go to an Edward Jones office, it's like 1-to-1, but there's more than 17,000 employees, and so. Long story short, I was on, we did these things we call courageous conversations, and we were talking about race. And so my field is like pretty much every other field where minorities in the field are like less than like 5%. In fact, for financial advisors, it's about 1 to 2%. And so it's myself on this call with about 600 other financial advisors in the Michigan area. And so I felt I needed to say something because our corporate office was coming to us because of what had happened to George Floyd and addressing everything that was going on with the Black Lives Matter movement. They wanted to do something to acknowledge the moment. And so what I wanted to do was to make sure that we didn't whitewash it over and be done with it. And so what it required of me to do was just step up and say, nope, nope, this is not one of those times where we're just gonna, say racism shouldn't exist and we're just gonna move on. We're gonna talk about it. And so, but I had to really lead that part of the conversation because our corporation, they definitely wanted to bring it up, but it definitely was going towards the, yep, everything's awesome now. We got you back. And it was in this place of, so there's this new term that I recently learned. It might not be new. It's called like performative allyship. It's the appearance of, yeah, we got you back. All right, now get back to work. And it's like, no, we're not going to let this end with a 1 hour conversation about race and white privilege and what it means to be racist. We're going to follow up. We're going to say, hey, when we have our next meeting, how are we going to talk about it? How are we going to keep this conversation going? How are we going to take this to a place of real action? So that's been my experience. That's kind of where I am with it. And so that's been how it's gone for me.
Okay, thanks for that, Quinn. I'm going to jump to Megan. What about you?
Yes, I was actually very fortunate to work with Ms. Parker over here. So there's been many a times that we have sat down and kind of had a one-to-one about differences in the culture to help me understand about racism. And not only have I talked a lot with her, but I talk a lot with the students. I'm getting their point of view about what they're seeing, about what they're feeling, and how different scenarios in the news, in the media would happen, or how it reflect if it was an African-American male doing what a white male was doing, and how would you respond against the culture. Since moving up north, which is a little bit more conservative up here, the race conversations hasn't happened as much. Just I like to start the racial conversations due to some of these kids have no clue. So I kind of like put little nuggets into them and kind of have these conversations with them. But at the same time, I have to be very careful about talking about these conversations because some parents do not appreciate that these topics are being talked about in school.
Wow. Okay. I think I want to come back to that.
Yeah, we need to circle back to that.
Yes.
Everybody put a pin in it.
Yeah.
Writing a note. No.
Yes. Tiffany, go ahead. Have you had any experiences talking about race in your workplace?
Well, it's interesting because I work in diversity and inclusion. So that is really the nature of my work. If I really think about the history of that, working in higher education, it really started with a lot of the universities popping up with these CDO roles where you have chief diversity officers. But in the very beginning, a lot of that took on this, food, flags, and fun, where we just kind of celebrate diversity. Whereas now we have moved into more of these conversations, the tough conversations that are going on. And even, students who are speaking up about issues and want to see things happening from the leadership. So we have a lot of demands that sometimes are put on our leaderships in forms of petitions, or even how students can actually voice their opinion without any repercussions. So it really has changed. So that conversation, and especially in the nature of the work that I do, we're getting those calls. We are the people that are managing kind of the conversation and workshops around diversity and inclusion. And I can't say that it looks the same for, every university, but the majority of the universities and working in higher education really have this focus on diversity and inclusion. But that is starting to expand and spill over into different sectors of work. I know Quinn mentioned, they gave them the okay, let's talk about it and then let's move on, kind of. But there are other, business who are also have CDO roles who have continued the conversations or also started diversity groups, resource groups for individuals at different businesses. So I will say that is kind of spilling over more about trying to have continuous conversations about work in the race in the workplace, which is not always easy.
Okay. Thank you for those perspectives, you guys, and sharing your experience. So I guess the first question is, should we have these conversations? Should there be training? I know there's a lot of cultural training or racial training. Should those things happen, or should we even be open to having discussions about even thinking about our feelings as African Americans, feelings as Caucasian Americans, feelings as in our own skin about how we embrace, right, the different races, and if we should celebrate, the different cultures, like who should that conversation be had and who should initiate that conversation? Anybody can go. I don't want to pick on one person. Okay, I'll pick on one person, Quinn, just because you said that you are. Hey, because you said that like you kind of had to, be that front runner and then making sure that it's not just something that's passed over. So how did you think it was preferred that it came from leadership to a certain extent? Or did you think someone else, or there should have been like a committee to start that? What would you have liked to see?
I honestly, I think it's always great when it comes from the top down and it's sincere. At the same time, I think if we're going to really have some courageous conversations, I think we as individuals need to step up and share our experiences, because, I think we always fall back on like the one Black experience, but there are several Black experiences. And so I think it's up to people of color to share those different experiences and not to be marginalized, not to fall into being marginalized, and to not just I think racism is so baked into our system that like we deal with racism in ways we don't even think about anymore because we're just so used to it. It's like when you're numb to something, you're like, oh, you mean you're supposed to treat me with respect? Oh, I didn't know that because you never did it. So wow. I think now is the time where we are, and that's an extreme because, respect is just a basic, but I think that we need to, commit to, challenging in a productive way. And that's kind of where I am with it, and why I said something is because I think it's important to challenge in a productive way and not just put my foot in the ground and build a line, but really try and build a bridge, but build it from a mutual place, not just it seems like we've always been trying to meet in the middle, and we went so far the other way, we don't even realize that like us just moving back a little bit is still meeting in the middle. And so that's been kind of where I've approached it and continue to approach it, where like I think no, we do need to press the issue. And so that's been my experience with it so thus far. And I would go further, but I need to plug up my computer, so I have to be honest because it just warned me. So I'll defer to someone else. But I think it's important that we constructively push back on and challenge ourselves and others on things that I think we've accepted in the past. Like, he's one of the good ones, or, little microaggressions. It's important that we don't let it slide, but we do it in a constructive way and not like a defensive way. So that's where my stance has been, is taking those moments to push back, but push back in a way to where it doesn't lead to a dead end, but leads to some good results. And with that, I'm going to black my screen out while I plug up.
So I'm going to chime in on that. I agree with what Quinn is saying. The conversation should really be happening on multiple levels. So, even, you have your mid-level, but then you also have like your top leadership. So if the conversation is happening on every level, that way you can meet in the middle. But we also know that change and cultural change only really happens from the top down. So they have to be included in that conversation. But you also have to gauge your work community to kind of see an assessment of what that conversation is, what kind of conversation is happening. The reality is that we all have our own unconscious bias. So we have this time from time to time view of perception of how we view race or how we view a certain kind of race. So a lot of conversations, like he said, having those hard conversations about race, and just really getting that counter narrative, because sometimes we get trapped in, or certain people get trapped in about a specific narrative attached to a certain race. But if you don't understand that narrative, and you just have these unconscious bias, or these microaggressions that you attach to a certain kind of race, you'll never really understand the Black plight, or how it affects people, or even in the workplace, why some people of color feel, oh, well, why am I always looked over for a position? Oh, I might be looked over for a position because I'm the one that always wears my hair natural. So just certain conversations that have to happen. And also when you bring in other races, so even looking at, you and Megan, you guys work together. So Megan really being an ally and having that real call out culture. So if she's hearing things about people, other colleagues making comments about the Black race, you have to challenge that narrative and have the call out culture and say, hey, that's not right. Why don't you really think about, your interpretation or what you thought about that particular race or people?
I absolutely 110% agree with both of you with the call out culture and having these conversations. And I think it's like how Tiffany said, it's like from both ends. You got to have from the top, and you got to have it like kind of like a grassroots movement to get some of these conversations going. Because sometimes the higher up levels have these bigger pictures that we don't necessarily see. So they might not be able to focus in on something like that important, just because they have such a huge, vast outlook on what they need to be doing. So it kind of takes everybody to start having these conversations, whether it's one-on-one, a group of people, to have these conversations, to have these foundations, so you can kind of spread out this conversation. I don't know how many times we've had these conversations with ourselves, with each other, with our students, and some of our admins in the past, like in our district. It's very important, because when somebody doesn't understand a culture or race, it will do far more harm than asking questions and being worried that they're going to be offended. They're being offensive asking these questions, if that makes sense.
That makes complete sense. And I think that's something that I can say, I feel like people are just really on eggshells. Like they want to know. They don't want to be, they don't want to offend anybody, but it's kind of like, should I ask? Should I find that one person to ask? And then all of a sudden you're the open person. So you're the representative, which, as we just stated, there's all these other narratives, which I found myself in. It's like, okay, well, Megan can speak to me about it, but like, I don't know if you're being sincere. I don't know if you're being genuine. But I think that what we stated here is like, it needs to come from everywhere. It needs to be genuine. It needs to be like real. So
just to that point, I think that is the key. It needs to be genuine. Disingenuine, like I said, performative allyship is not needed. We don't need it. Honestly, I don't need it. I don't want it. But genuine conversation, genuine trying to understand, that's valid. I mean, like, for example, in my prior meeting to here, we were talking about some things, and we were in the course of the conversation, we talked about Black Lives Matter in 3 different perspectives. Like, there's Black Lives Matter, like, I'm Quinn, I'm Black, my life matters. There's Black Lives Matters, the movement, and then there's Black Lives Matters, the organization. And so being able to have those conversations where you can like look at the complexity, see how they're all the same in one but different, is what it's about. And so having those genuine conversations, and the conversation I was having, it was genuine. Like it wasn't a debate. It was just like, okay, so what does this refer to? What does that refer to? And how are we putting these together? And so that's helpful because it helps to paint the picture is what we're trying to do. And so I say I'm all for genuine conversation. I have no time for disingenuine conversation.
Absolutely. And if for anybody that's watching, make sure you go to our comments and make sure you post your comment, your question, your wisdom, something, whatever you have on your mind. Make sure you post that just to just to remind you all so that we can be able to see that. We put a pin in something.
Wait. I just want to make a comment to what Quinn is saying and about it being disingenuine. I think also it becomes that way when you're only addressing it in that moment in time. These need to be continuous conversations that need to continue to happen. And a lot of people are saying that this movement is different because it hasn't just been, okay, Black Lives Matter for, the past 4 months, but we're still moving. But it'll be interesting to see all of these CEOs and COOs and everybody who put out these statements, how long this is going to continue. And my line of work is going to continue because that's what I do, diversity and inclusion. We're going to continue to talk about this. But who is going to continue those conversations within the workplace to continue, even if you are at a mid-level in your, organization and not sitting at the top?
I agree.
That's a valid point. I mean,
like
it's like you have all these bigwigs promising all these things, but once it starts hurting the bottom line, are they going to change their tune and kind of revert back, or they're going to continue on strong, which provides allies and support and call it culture for, an entire race, which is awesome and beneficial. So we can start having these conversations. So if they start backing away, people will start being hesitant and being even more on eggshells to talk and have some of these conversations with their coworkers or friends or, anything along those lines.
Yeah, and I think that's where we as individuals need to know our organizations, know our rights as employees, and know what we can do. Like, for example, I think that's where we need to keep pushing back, and why I personally am going to keep pushing back. And when they ask for feedback and they say, hey, how are we doing as an organization? You guys dropped the ball and you did a statement and that was it. Or you reach out to human resources department and say, hey, I thought that this was something that was important to us. What have we done since then? What benchmarks have we set? What key indicators have we put in place? Have we hit them? Like, how are we ingraining this into who we are? Or was it just cool in the moment and now we're over it?
Right.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions too. Like, what are we looking like? Are we looking for tangible items? Like, what are we looking for to come from these conversations? And what initiatives are we trying to see? I'm sorry, I cut you off, Megan. Go ahead.
No, that's what I was kind of like what I was saying up here. Like, when George Floyd happened and Breonna Taylor and everything along like that, we had a really strong call out here for justice. There was protests, Black Lives Matter protest in Petoskey. It was this really big movement. But now that it's from the point of view of up here, it's still really important, but there's other thing that's happening. And unfortunately, it's kind of going on the back burner. And that's what I was talking about. There's like, people were like, okay, let's focus on what we need to focus in school. And, yes, it's important, but so is X, Y, and Z. And the hard for me to kind of agree with that just because of my past of working in Wayne and Washtenaw County and working at the school and then coming up here, so it's like, yes, it's important. It's a tragedy. It's an important movement, but let's kind of move on. That's kind of like, and that's not everybody up here.
Right.
It's a good split. I would like to say it's like a good 50-50 split up here. But
that's good numbers, by the way.
Huh? What?
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying.
By the way, we're just joking.
Hey, not trying to judge and put my bias on it, but I'll say much better than I thought.
No. It's depending on where you go. I'll be blatantly clear. If you drive up here, you're going to see a lot of support for the current administration. but then you're going to see a lot of non-support from the current administration. I think I'm being a little gracious with 50-50 up here, at least in my community. But if you go into some other communities where it is less diverse than we are, it's going to be a different skew. It's going to be very different vision. Like there's a city up here called Wolverine. It's very small. That's driving through that the whole time. I only saw one sign. It says Black Lives Matters, and that's it. And everything else was the current support for the administration. So that person in itself is not, gaining the support of his neighbors or anything along that lines. But like there's few people up here still trying to keep this discussion alive. And it's very important for me with my coworkers. Thankfully, I work with wonderful people who are open to these discussions. But, sometimes in the school, it's in a more rural area that it's like, okay, we're not needing to hit on every current event. So kind of let's just sum it up a little bit, if that makes sense. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. But you said something interesting too. You said parents give you pushback. Like
parents, yes, in a sense, but it's like I teach a little bit younger ones. So it's like, okay, it's kind of a hard line of we really haven't talked to our kids about this in a sense. Like they know what's going on, but they don't know the depth of it. Okay. And we don't really kind of want it from somebody who's not parents to talk about it. And I get that. Like I get that, I know really good friends who have rarely told their kids. They know about all the incidents that happen and that it's sad and they say prayers for them. But then there's other family members who have like going to protests, who's doing, marching and doing all these things. So it's like within family dynamics, it's, that as well. And it's to each to own. But my biggest thing is like, this needs to be known. This does not need to go away. So I have to be very careful to tread on, keep bringing it up before the parents start getting, or people start getting a little
antsy.
Antsy is a good word. It's just, I teach world geography. It's hard to kind of pull in. I mean, I can pull in, with the 7 continents and stuff like that, and trying to pull in these issues without it being like huge red flags of like, guess what I learned? Like when I talk about religion, I have to preface, I am not stating any religion is right or wrong. Like I have to like, everyone repeat after me type of a deal, because I know that some parents do not appreciate me talking about other religions versus Christianity. And so it's that same kind of mentality. Like I want to talk to kids about it. So like, I'm not getting a lot of parents pushback, but there's, a few that are like, I want to talk about this. It's not necessarily.
You got to like weave it together. You have to be like, I'm going to talk about Brazil, Libya, and Malaysia. One of those.
All those. Bolivia. Let me tell you about Bolivia.
Like write those 3 down right next to each other.
In all capital letters because it's proper names. Yeah. So make sure you underline it. But then when you go home, it's just a different mindset up here with parents. And I have to be very cautious just because I'm new up here. A lot of the other people that I teach with, they've grown up in here, so they know the community and culture better than I do, and they know where you can push it and where you're not. But for me, it's extremely important to have these conversations with the kids younger on, because they're going to go to state, they're going to go to Michigan, they're going to go to all these big schools where they don't, not Michigan, no, where they don't have these experiences or these conversations, and they're going to get themselves in trouble, or they're going to start asking the right questions. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's important to have these conversations. And there's sometimes I still, text Parker, be like, hey, you got a question.
No. It's fair. Which is fair, right?
Fair.
That's all fair. And like, I think that actually one of my experiences, the first year I was in the dorm, and of course that was my first time living with other people at all. And of course, Michigan State is a predominantly white institution. And so that whole culture shock, like I literally remember my floor mates like were in their undergarments just going back and forth in the hallway. And I was like, you can't do that. Like my parents come here and visit me from time to time, you know? And I'm like, and so it became well, this is an honest platform. It became confrontational. That's what happened. And
oh, we just got real.
I had to have a sit down with the RA with my roommate, who's my best friend, Kelly. Not incriminating anyone. But it was just like we had to really break down, like, okay, your dorm room is your home, and whatever you do in your home is your business, but the hallway is like the neighborhood street, and you're just street walking. Like, you cannot do that. And you know, I don't know if they were under some type of influence of anything, but you know, they got a little agitated. And I
have a question.
Yes.
I too attended Michigan State University. That fine establishment in East Lansing. Was this a co-ed dorm?
This was a co-ed dorm, which I would like to point out, the only dorm that I ever lived in. I was in Armstrong, so in Brody.
So it was a co-ed dorm. Okay, because per se, my friends, not me. My friends would venture to the lady floor all the time and just kind of casually walk through, you know,
hoping,
saying hello. So that's interesting. Yeah, literally trying to make friends and influence people, literally. So, okay. Side note. All right, sorry.
So I mean, hey, that could have been their jackpot day. I don't know. Okay, I just know I took it as I was offended, and they were like, "You tripping?" I'm like, "No, you're tripping." And so even for me, like, it was a culture shock and then a necessary conversation on race that had to happen, because like we had it where the whole floor had to like go into those little communal floor rooms and have like this kumbaya. And I'm just like, so this is nothing different. It's kind of like shocking to me that, you know, not only that something violent had to happen to spark this whole thing, but like we're just repeating history, and it's like with no movement, like a hamster wheel. And it just, I don't know, it not only concerns me, but it hurts me. And I just, especially when I am in a position where I'm educating children, and you have to think about who is educating them and what they're saying in their perspective and their lenses, because a lot of my friends have children, and you send them off to school hoping that they're going to have a great experience, and it's like you have someone that's totally disconnected, that has no idea and does not care. So I feel like anywhere you go, these conversations are necessary. Like anybody think.
Well, Ty, I think you tie in a great point that nothing, violent or anything had to happen in order to, but it led to a conversation on race. The thing that we know about all of us going to college, or, college students, we all come from different backgrounds. We all bring that's what I said, we all have our own biases, and, those are shaped by how we were raised, what we saw on TV, things that influenced us. So, coming to college and being comfortable with running through halls in our undergarment, that might not have been raised at your house, but somebody else's house, they were more free with what they were able to do. So, but that also led a conversation about upbringing, which can also be a cultural conversation about like, oh, that we don't do that in, in Black, Right. He ain't running around free. I don't know what you saw on TV or you thought because, you seen Roots or something. That everybody
Oh
running
Lord.
around like that.
Oh Lord.
What we do,
Oh
So,
Lord.
I just think that it's interesting. You talk about it's a repeat cycle, but we also have to think about, and like Megan said, she's part of the influence being a teacher very early on, but there are those boundaries in terms of, parenting boundaries of what I want to expose my kids to at a certain age. When you talk about that, the interesting question is at what age, I taught a summer course when all of this happened of graduate students, and I had a young lady ask, and I have a young daughter, but we're not having a conversation because she's only one. But one of my students was saying, I don't know how to have the conversation or even yet to have the conversation with my 7 and 12-year-old Black sons. You know what I mean? So the conversation about race or about what happened, you even have parents who don't really know how to navigate that conversation at this point in time still too. So imagine the difficulty of even Megan in the classroom.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And I'll take it back to my previous point too, that I think we have to also recognize that, all our experiences are unique in our culture, just in our culture. For example, I grew up on 8 Mile, but I went to Ferndale High School. So my school was diverse, but it was diverse both like racially and socioeconomically. And so for me, honestly, I didn't recognize that was different until I got to Michigan State too. And then I had friends who went to DPS and they were like, I never went to school with white people before. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So, I mean, so I think I think another part of the conversation is recognizing our culture, but our environment too is ours. And how do we mesh those together? Because that is the key is, to your point, finding how you mesh those together. I'm as a Black man, I have all daughters. So, and I talk to my daughters about what it means to be Black. I talk to their Blackness, but a question I often pose to my friends who are Black parents is like, how are you talking to them about being Black age appropriately? So like we know about, strange fruit, we know about, our history, but how are you doing it age appropriately to not transfer that PTSD? Because we as Black people have transgenerational PTSD. So how do we emancipate our children from that, but allow them to have their culture too? And it's really an ongoing question. So
yeah,
it's real.
it's hard, and coming from me as a white teacher, it's hard to teach at times African American history because unfortunately the curriculum is on certain negative times in the history. For me, I like having them research inventor, like when I worked at Bradford, worked like inventors and all these people that have made huge advancements and overcame many strifes and other stuff like that, to kind of get away from the negative aspect, like only talking about like strange fruit and slavery and everything along that line. That you do have more of a culture, you do have more of race than just this. Like experience it, like have fun with it. And it's hard for me, for being in a predominantly white community, to start bringing in these issues too early on, if that makes sense. I don't think it's too early on, but also tying it into curriculum is way easier in the upper levels because you can tie it in any which way you look at it. But, here when we're in, ancient history and world geography, it's kind of hard to bring in the George Floyd and the issues, Black Lives Matters, and talk about how it is being in a movement that I not fully in, if that makes sense. Like I support it, I protest out all that stuff, but I'm not experiencing what some of the students are experiencing. So it's hard for me to do it. So I just try to get as much as possible to have these conversations so they have an outlet, they have somebody to talk to, whether it's me or somebody else, if that makes sense.
But to your point, too, your students were very open, I believe, from what I saw. High school students were very open with having dialogue about race and what's going on, just from what they saw at the time. Like, not necessarily, of course, George Floyd isms, if you will, right now, not to anything or diminish anything, but I think like they have been able to recognize like these things are happening now, but I don't think that they've been able to connect it to like historically this has happened as well. And I think we don't focus on it. Like we don't, it's not enough time that's talked about it. And I think that I can say why. I can just say I think that's how the curriculum is built. And I'm going to that, but that's not what we're going to go into. But I think that also, because there are a lot of white educators, your students have to be comfortable with you. They have to, again, it goes back to that genuine part. So again, with the workplace, like, if someone asks me right now, do I have someone that would speak on my behalf that is a white counterpart? At my last place of employment, yes, because they're here. But now I'm kind of like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can confidently say, yeah, they're my ally. And I think that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Because this is not just a Black issue, really, at the end of the day. This is a human issue. But we are focused in on Black lives because right now, that's what's mattering right now. So I don't know. Anybody have anything with that? Kind of thinking of that, like, okay, who's my ally in this place? If I'm not at the table.
Yeah, I think that
you at work. Let me.
No, I feel you. I mean, I think true colors are being shown right now. So I have, some of my white counterparts who are really struggling with terms, honestly, like white privilege, and honestly, they're struggling with racism because I think that systematic racism is not a topic they've even began to dig into. They just think about racism being a synonym for bad, and they're not bad. They're good people. They're hardworking people. Right. And, to some of those folks' credit, some of them are hardworking. At the same time, they've yet to grasp that like white privilege. And that's kind of why I wish we could find another word than white privilege, because like white privilege to them is a turnoff. Like they don't get that it doesn't mean you get a free Big Mac at McDonald's when you walk in. It just means on the way out, the cop might not shoot you for it. So to have that conversation with them, you already start from a place of first saying like, look, dude, I know you don't get to cut the line at Walt Disney World just because you're white. Like, so it's the challenge again of understanding culturally where we come from. And so, because I've seen it with some of my coworkers, some of my friends who push back and they're like, look, man, like I want to help and I feel for you. Like they've called me and said like, my heart is there, man. I'm really struggling. And I'm like, what are you struggling with? Like my life matters. Tell me what you're struggling with. And it's like this reconciliation that a part of them might actually be rooted in something bad is the hard part to have the conversation about, which, in some ways we do have things for some of us where some of the things we taught, they weren't right. Like we were taught them, we believe them, but they ain't right. So, to have that conversation and to help those people, you can kind of see, for me, I can see them better because I'm like, oh, I see you. Like you want to help, but you don't really get it. Like you thought you get it because you love me. There's one saying, I wish it was mine, but I've been saying a lot lately. It's hard to hate up close. And so, like Megan and Ty, you guys are friends. You're Megan, you're obviously white. Ty, you're obviously Black. But, up close, knowing people that way, people. You don't know their culture or their color. People. And so getting to that point to where we can have those conversations is really, really, I think, important. And then also seeing who those people are who are closer to what you need and those people who are further away. So, and that's what I've seen lately is just who's closer than I thought to what I consider an ally and who is much further away than I ever would have imagined. So,
Yes, Arlo. That the cat popped in, and
I
that
know.
hey,
He wanted something to say too, but he apparently doesn't.
get it. Hey,
oh, there
I'm,
it's cool. It's cool.
I'm a dog guy, but hey, have at it.
He's kind of salty. I'm not playing with him. We already talked about this earlier, so
It's fine. Things that happen. This is why it's a candid conversation, and we are virtual, and we're at home, so that's fine. Tiffany, I felt like you were going to say something.
Oh no, I was just agreeing. True colors are definitely being shown right now. I remember when everything first happened, I would have a conversation with one of my friends just in watching my Facebook timeline and seeing who, especially in terms of like friends that I had from different races, what they were saying, if they were saying anything, because I also think that your silence says a lot.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, such and such hasn't commented on. You're like, okay, you poke that bear, like
pin that.
Yeah, I definitely that makes a lot of. I agree with that. You kind of start to see, kind of who's closest to what you may think as an ally versus who's further away. But we also have to recognize that, becoming an ally may take time because, like I said, recognizing what white privilege really means or what having privilege means, because we all have privilege. But when you talk about racial privilege, that's a whole different gamut. So just recognize that doesn't make you a racist, even though you have, this white privilege. Is really rooting that privilege in anti-racism work to help Black, the Black community advance or, note the movements that we're making.
Oh, you fired me up. So I got to hop on the back of that too.
Okay, come on.
And also at the same time, recognize that we talk about, the books like How to Be an Anti-Racist, but let's just talk sheer facts. The better off we all are, the more money we can all make. It helps everyone. Even if from you want to look from an economic perspective, the more people we can get working, the more people we can get making a decent income, the more people we can get contributing is better off. So, if you have a hard time dealing with the racial stuff, from a human race perspective, you got to get the numbers of how it all works. So, and that's where I'm like, don't you get simple numbers? Okay, say you're it's just, I don't see colors. Well, do you see green?
And we ain't talking about Spartan.
No, I mean, but go green. So, but still.
Listen, let me tell you, social media definitely shows true colors. And I don't know. I have not experienced where I've seen. I try not to follow too many people from work. Let's start there. I don't.
Good call. Good call.
Decide. I might not even want you to know who I am over there. You might not know who Type is, but I have seen some comments just perusing, and I'm like, I can't even speak to you today. I'm not sure who you are, but I feel like then I'm like, but was I supposed to see that?
If it was posted, you were supposed to see it.
Listen, that snooze button has been getting a workout. I've actually thought about it today. Around October 3rd, a lot of people, actually October 4th, I'm gonna be hitting the snooze button on a lot of people because election is November, is 30 days after. So I'm gonna just make sure that snooze button is pushed.
I'm going social media off after my birthday on the 5th. Just saying, just because of the same thing. It's leading up to elections, and there is. And when I tell the kids that it's somebody else's opinion. You do not have to agree with it. You don't have to, fight it, but you just have to acknowledge it's their opinion. And then I usually follow up with, however wrong it may be, it's still their opinion, but it's astonishing. Just like Tiffany said, like some of these people that from different platforms that I've like, oh, I swore we were on the same page right here. And then I'm starting to see him like Quinn. I'm like, excuse. And I was like, I'm just going off until after the elections, and maybe not even until the new year, just because I know it's just going to get it's going to get ugly, and it's going
to get ugly.
Social media gives people the platform to state what they want without any
repercussions.
It's freedom of speech, yeah, but it's not freedom of consequences. Like, you're gonna have to deal with the consequences sooner or later. Yeah. But being behind the screen, I can type this out.
There's no fact checking either.
He deleted someone. He was so bad. On the comments, he deleted someone. It was so bad. Yeah, I definitely have done that.
I can't, even with some people. I hit this news. I just been challenging them lately. Like when people post something, like somebody posted something on mine, and she just said, she's like, Joe Biden hasn't done anything for 30 years in government. I was like, how's that? I just pushed back and I was like, how's that? And she's like, I'm just saying he hasn't done anything effective. I'm like, so he's been in office for 30 years and you don't think he's done anything? Like not one thing? There was no response to that. But I think that's how we have to, you have to push back in a non-aggressive way, but like when you see this, like these shenanigans, and that's what it is. And, particularly people who, really gets me is people who, and I'm not calling anybody out, but profess faith and then follow it up by blasting or putting something that completely shows no spirituality or Christianity. And you're like, oh, you're a Christian? Oh, wow.
Woo!
I'm not going to go there.
Black and gold.
Not going to go there. Sorry.
Hey, just an example.
Oh
my gosh. So I know we're dwindling in time, but like I really want you all to be able to say your last comments or thoughts or whatever you have. And then this has been a great discussion. It's been going we were like here, boom, 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 boom. But it's all good stuff. So I really do appreciate it. So I'm going to start with, I want to see if I can do this correctly. Megan.
And I'm going to do the next one because it's easy. I'm just going to go down to Tiffany. Exactly. You have the hard one to go in over.
I was going to say.
So I can just do this. And...
Yes.
I would just like to thank you. I'm honored to be on this platform with you, Quinn and Tiffany. Just talking about this, and I think this could go on for yet another hour or longer, and I would love to come back and have these discussions with you. I just feel that I have allies with you, and knowing that you have an ally with me, having these conversations and knowing that I know the importance of the topic of race in the workplace, and I'm trying to fight the good fight, and I just am very thankful and very honored that I got to be here with you. So, Tiffany, you.
Okay. Same here. It's been an honor and a privilege to be on this panel with my co-panelists. Very interesting conversation. Like Megan said, we probably could talk about race because it's a loaded topic for hours. We could continue this. So I do want to thank Ty for inviting me to the first Black and the Bold conversation. I guess what I will say about race and racism, very much like the national pandemic we're in with COVID-19, racism itself is a pandemic. Okay, until we start to unpack and see all of the things that are tangled in that, like which includes, of course, economics, housing, healthcare, all of that is tied into racism, which, by the way, I think, Burgess, I have a suggestion on how to tie in Racism and the conversation about race and what's going on in geography. So we can talk a little later. But it's been fun. So thank you.
You gotta go. Okay, Quinn. We're not gonna have Tiffany do
it. Yeah, I was waiting for the pass off. Oh, okay. What? No, it's this way. Oh, thank you.
I should.
You know, I'll catch it. Let me see. This way. All right. Okay. Now, honestly, this conversation, it did kind of cover the gamut, because talking about race and racism is a gigantic topic, and to take a small bite out of it is kind of hard without having a little bit of residual. And so I guess I'll first like to thank you for allowing me to be a part of this panel. I had a ball. So thank you, Ty, for having me and allowing me to say go green and be on this panel. But I guess I would just reiterate, my takeaway from this conversation and my challenge to us is like to find constructive ways to move the needle with not just within a place that people can hear you. For example, pushing your managers, pushing your friends, not pushing them away, but getting them to really see a little bit more and really take a perspective, because I think at the end of the day, we do need allies. We're gonna need support. If we're gonna make changes, we're gonna have to change people's hearts and their minds, and that's gonna start internally, but it's gonna start externally too. So have those challenging conversations, but make sure they're being productive and not just being like a venting session, because like the term white privilege is almost offensive to some white people. We want to find a way to make them be a part of the cause. So just, keep having those conversations, keep challenging in a constructive way. And, let's just keep talking and not let it really be a movement. So it can continue to grow.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Wait, let me do this.
I got it. Wait. I got it. So I just want to thank you, Megan, Tiffany, and Quinn, for being part of this first series. I'm so excited about it. We had such a fruitful conversation. Again, we have already talked about how we can go hours and hours and on about it, but the main thing is that we need to challenge people, that our loved ones, the people that we are around and we speak to all the time, and not necessarily take away the history, but in a positive tone. Make it comfortable to have the conversation, because we want to move the needle, as Quinn stated. So I definitely appreciate you all. I'm excited. Y'all don't really know. I'm trying to contain it, but I'm excited. And so Black in the Bold will be featured, okay, every third Wednesday at 8:00 on this platform. Every third Wednesday. We want you to join us there. We're going to be talking about a lot of things. Queen, we're going to talk about sports soon.
Oh.
Wait, time out. There are no sports. What are you talking about?
I want to have some people on here. We're going to talk about that, because got a lot of
about non-sports.
We're going to talk about this upcoming election.
Oh boy. Can people put up the gif of like Michael Jackson eating the popcorn? Because that's what I'm gonna do with that one.
And we're gonna talk about after the election too. So we have a lot of good dialogue that we are planning on having. Just want to thank MSUBA for starting this organization. Want to give a shout out to our president, Dr. Chandra L. Marshall, Jeanette Patterson, our first VP, Paris Ross, our second VP, so our executive team up there. And I'm just excited for Black in the Bold and for you all here with me today, this evening, to help push the narrative and help get the work done. So the way we're going to end this is just simply, I'm going to say, go green.
Go white.
Go
white.
You're
go white.
Thank you. Till next time, everyone. We'll see you next month on MSUBAOC, Black in the Bold. They so Peace out.